We are counting down 10 wild American geography twists. On the surface, the Hatfield-McCoy feud looks like a simple family fight. It seems like a regular mountain conflict. Yet the deeper story shows something else entirely. The ground itself pushed two families into open war. Records show this fight crossed state lines and triggered armed raids. It even reached the highest court in the country. One spot holds a life-sized marble figure. That figure was shipped across the ocean to a quiet valley. Another location shows how a shifting river border confused the law, and the number one spot reveals a massive geographic surprise. Most of these places seem completely familiar on the surface. Visitors see rows, hillsides, and small towns. Nothing looks unusual at first glance, but records show layers of history working quietly underneath. The real scale stays hidden unless someone digs deeper. The gap between what people see and the actual ground is huge. The early spots bring solid surprises, but the top of this list moves into wild territory. By the time number one hits, the scale feels unreal. Each spot looks ordinary at first. But the closer the look, the stranger it gets. Let's begin with fact number 10. Fact number 10, the shifting river border. The Tug Fork looked like a quiet river line. It sat between Kentucky and West Virginia, but the water hit a moving border. That border kept shifting over time. Maps from the late 1800s show the channel wandered during floods, which means homes sometimes sat in one state one year, then they sat in another state later. That confusion fed the feud more than most realize. Families used the river as a natural line, yet the river refused to stay put. Survey crews measured sections that moved dozens of feet. That is about the width of a highway sliding sideways, so when armed posses crossed the Tug Fork, arguments followed. Local law fought over who had authority near the water. Records show repeated disputes over jurisdiction. The crazy part, the river still shifts today after strong storms. The border changed what justice could look like. A person could cross in the minutes. Yet papers and warrants did not cross so fast. That delay created space for retaliation. A raid could happen fast. Then a group could scatter back over the line. The river made hatred harder to contain. You cannot make this up. A simple geographic detail acted like a massive multiplier. Fact number 9, Blackberry Creek. Open range, Blackberry Creek seems like any narrow mountain stream. Clear water runs between steep banks. But this quiet creek helped shape early tensions. Floyd Hatfield lived near this waterway. The McCoy family lived just across the valley. That close distance meant livestock often roamed between properties. And that is where the confusion started. Mountain farms back then used open range grazing, which means animals wandered freely through woods and hollows. Razorback hogs traveled far while rooting for food. So ear notches became the only way families marked ownership. Each cut pattern worked like a brand. The result? Disputes were almost guaranteed when animals crossed property lines. Records show Blackberry Creek sat near key Hatfield land. Today, the creek still flows through the same tight valley. What looks like just another stream sat at a conflict's edge. A hog sounds like a small thing. Yet in 1878, a hog dispute acted like a trigger. Records describe Randolph McCoy accusing Floyd Hatfield of stealing a hog. Agricultural records show hogs often ranged miles from home, which means honest mix-ups did happen. Yet pride and family loyalty raised the stakes fast. The land itself kept pushing neighbors together. It pushed them face to face. Fact number 8, the Pike County Courthouse. Pike County's early courthouse looked like a frontier building. Nothing suggested it would fuel a famous feud. Yet this is where the hog dispute reached formal arbitration. Floyd Hatfield denied stealing the Razorback. Randolph McCoy insisted the ear notches matched his mark. So the case went before local justice Valentine Hatfield. The court sat on the Kentucky side, which already made the setting tense. The final ruling favored Hatfield. McCoy had to pay court costs. The result? Deep resentment that did not fade. Today, the Pike County seat continues operating. Government offices still stand where early courts once met. What looked like a routine case actually hardened family lines. Valentine Hatfield was related to Devil, Ance Hatfield, and the hearing took place in McCoy territory. That setup created instant suspicion. Even if the ruling followed custom, the optics looked bad. McCoy walked away humiliated and angry. That shift matters a lot, because once a conflict becomes about fairness, it spreads. The location of that hearing still sits within Pike County. Courthouse ground from that era remains part of the town today. A court ruling can look like closure, yet it can also look like proof of bias. It put the fight into a public room with a judge. Fact number 7. The isolated McCoy Hollow Pike. Counties back, hollows seem empty today. Thick woods cover most of the slopes, but these narrow valleys held scattered farms in the 1800s. Randolph McCoy lived in one of these tight hollows. At first glance, it looked completely isolated, yet the geography made disputes almost unavoidable. Mountain hollows act like massive natural funnels. They guide animals along the same narrow dirt paths. The hollow where McCoy lived still exists today. Steep ridges rise fast on both sides. Travel routes remain limited by the steep terrain. That tight geography explains how conflicts spread so fast. The land itself kept pushing neighbors together. Isolation was a daily condition for everyone, and travel could be slow even for a few miles, so a family group could stay close-knit. That closeness means that's fast mobilizing for conflict. If a cousin is hurt, word reaches the next hollow quickly. The result is speed without formal planning. Weak law enforcement was about distance, terrain, and time. An armed group could be gone before deputies arrived. Cycles of retaliation had room to breathe. The McCoy homestead sat in a tight Kentucky hollow, which means frustrations had little space to cool off. The hollow still looks quiet and wooded right now, yet the memory remains tied to the landscape. Fact number 6. The pawpaw. Bush Riverbank. The pawpaw bushes along the river looked harmless enough. They were common shrubs growing near the Tug Fork banks, but in August 1882, those bushes became a brutal sight. Ellison Hatfield was stabbed by 3 McCoy men. After Ellison died, the Hatfield group crossed the river. They tied the 3 McCoy brothers to the bushes. This was not a quick or random scuffle. Witness reports describe a deliberate setup along the riverbank. Then came the heavy gunfire. Accounts describe a volley of more than 50 shots. That volume of gunfire ensured there were no survivors. State historical records indicate the killings shocked nearby communities. But this event changed the massive scale. The Tug Fork Valley itself helped the feud keep burning. Steep hills hem in the river on both sides. Travel in the 1880s was slow and difficult, which means armed groups could move through back routes. They could stay completely out of sight. West Virginia University research notes the valley's rugged layout. That layout delayed outside law enforcement. Posse movements often took hours or days to organize, so when violence broke out, response time lagged badly. The location near Matewan still draws historians today. Records and local memory keep the event firmly in place. The river still marks the border right now. Fact number 5, the burned cabin site. The New Year's massacre site looked like an ordinary cabin clearing, but that quiet patch pushed the feud into open war. Armed men attacked the McCoy cabin before sunrise. Evidence shows around 20 to 30 armed men gathered. That number matters. It was closer to a full, armed posse, moving with purpose. They surrounded the cabin while the family slept inside. Gunfire then ripped through windows and doors. The result was chaos meant to force the McCoys outside. Bullets punched through wood walls, which means the structure offered little protection. The fight happened in darkness, which increased confusion. Gunfire alone did not drive the McCoys out. So the attackers switched tactics. Evidence indicates they set the structure on fire. That decision raised the stakes instantly. Fire spreads fast through dry wood. Flames forced the family to choose between smoke or bullets. The result was a deadly funnel toward the exits. 2 family members were killed during the escape. Homes are where safety is supposed to live. So when homes get attacked, the conflict changes shape. The result is a wider circle of harm. A burned home is not just wood and ash. It is food stores, bedding, tools, and winter safety. In mountain country, losing that in winter can be life-threatening. Which means law officers suddenly faced pressure to act fast. Fact number 4, the Supreme Court geography. The posse raids into West Virginia seemed like routine arrests, but the way they happened created a massive legal storm. Kentucky officers seized suspects without formal paperwork between states, which means West Virginia officials saw the action as kidnapping. State letters show Governor Wilson refused to approve extradition requests, yet the captured men were already sitting in a Kentucky jail. That is what made the situation explosive. The arrests happened first. Legal process came later. Pliant Man did not accept the arrest quietly. From his jail cell, he filed a federal habeas corpus petition. He argued he was seized illegally in West Virginia, which means Kentucky had no right to try him. The case moved upward through the legal system, and soon the fight reached the highest court in the country. The Supreme Court hearing looked like a normal docket item, but this rural feud forced a constitutional showdown in Washington. 7 justices sided with Kentucky. The ruling said an irregular capture did not block prosecution. That single decision kept the trials alive. Without it, several defendants might have avoided court entirely. What is wild is how fast the impact showed. Once the legal barrier fell, prosecutors pushed forward. Legal historians still point to that ruling today. It remains part of discussions about interstate capture cases right now. A remote feud ended up shaping national legal precedent. That precedent still applies today. Fact number 3, the Pikeville Jail Yard. The Pikeville Jail Yard looked completely ordinary in early 1890. Bare dirt ground and simple wooden fencing marked the space. Nothing suggested it would host a heavily watched execution. Ellison Mounts faced a murder conviction tied to Alifair McCoy. Evidence persuaded the jury to impose death by hanging. Here is the thing. Kentucky had already banned public executions in 1880, yet records show thousands still gathered near the Pikeville jail. The execution moved forward on a makeshift gallows anyway. That gap between the legal ban and the crowd is striking. Witness accounts describe spectators filling nearby hillsides and rooftops. Engineers later estimated the wooden gallows rose 1 story high. Mounts was only 22 years old when the execution took place. That age stands out sharply when compared to other fighters. Many participants were older and far more experienced, yet he became the only one executed by the state. Reports describe him as nervous but cooperative, so the image of a young man on the gallows stuck. Mounts reportedly shouted that the Hatfields made him do it. Those words spread quickly through newspapers and local talk. The result? Debate over responsibility kept going even after the execution. The case still sparks discussion today among historians. His unmarked burial site remains part of the story today. He remains the only person legally executed for the feud. That is insane. Fact number 2, the Kentucky State Penitentiary. The Kentucky State Penitentiary looked like a standard stone prison. Thick stone walls and heavy iron doors stood out. Guard towers kept watching every single yard, yet what happened inside stretched longer than many expected. Records show 8 Hatfields and allies left court facing life sentences. They received life at hard labor in the penitentiary. That meant decades behind stone walls, working prison details daily. Tasks often included quarry work or heavy prison maintenance. Those exhausting routines could run year after year. Studies indicate some inmates remained locked up for over a decade, which means the feud's consequences stretched deep into the 20th century. But records show the life sentences did not always mean dying inside. Several of the convicted men later received actual paroles. Some walked out between 1903 and the 1920s. That gap between a life sentence and release catches people off guard. Parole boards reviewed behavior, time served, and political pressure. Good conduct reports helped some inmates get out early. The result? Men sentenced for life slowly filtered back into the outside world. Prison ledgers still track those exact releases today. The feud did not simply fade after the gunfire stopped, it moved straight into the heavy legal system, and the consequences were still unfolding in prison yards years later. The massive paper trail remains today. Fact number 1, Devil Anse's imported marble statue. A quiet cemetery in Logan County looks like any burial ground. Simple stones and tree cover fill the slope. Nothing gives a hint of what stands at the center, but walk closer and a full human figure rises from the marble. It is carved at life size and set high on a base. The statue marks the grave of Devil Anse Hatfield. The finished memorial reached about 13 feet tall, counting the pedestal. That alone sets it apart from most rural grave markers. What is wild is where the stone actually came from. The marble was cut in Carrara, Italy. Craftsmen shaped the figure in 1922 using a model from photographs. Then the finished pieces crossed the Atlantic Ocean. They traveled inland to Sarah Ann, West Virginia. That distance equals the span from New York to Los Angeles and back. Shipping such heavy carved stone required rail, ship, and wagon transport. Family records show the memorial honored his massive timber success. Hatfield stands in mountaineer clothing, hat tilted forward, boots planted wide. The figure faces Island Creek Valley and still overlooks the area right now. The monument still stands right now, exposed to weather but intact. Studies show Carrara stone resists weathering better than local rocks. You cannot make this up. A remote hillside holds imported stone shaped by overseas craftsmen. It still anchors the valley view more than a century later. Across this countdown, one pattern keeps showing up. Ordinary landscapes often hide layers of history that never appear at first glance. A shifting river border, hills cut by hidden logging networks, and a cemetery transformed by marble shipped across an ocean. These features remain in place today. They still shape how the region looks and functions right now. That is what makes careful observation completely worth it. The surface tells one quiet story. The ground underneath usually tells another.